the men and women of Udenta decided to separate and live differently. The village that once thrived as one had split into two separate worlds. On the eastern side lived the men, on the western side lived the women. A wide path ran between them like a scar on the earth. It had not always been this way. There was a time when families lived together under the same roof, but those days were gone. The men used to come home angry and take out their frustrations on their wives with heavy fists. The women fought back the only way they knew how. Some mixed bitter herbs into their husbands' food. Others used roots that made men sick for days. The women who could not do this suffered in silence until their bodies could take no more. The men gathered in the square and complained that their wives did nothing all day. They said women were lazy and only good for causing trouble. The women told different stories. They spoke of working from dawn until their hands bled, while their husbands treated them like animals. They were tired of being possessions instead of people. Every day the king sat on his stool and listened to another case. A woman with a swollen eye, a man clutching his stomach in pain, a child caught between two angry parents. The king grew weary. His hair turned white from the stress of keeping peace. One morning he made a decision that would change Udenta forever. The village would split. Men on one side, women on the other. Each group would handle their own affairs. Any man who crossed into the women's territory would die. Any woman who entered the men's side would face the same fate. The law was absolute. The separation began immediately. Mothers watched their sons being led away. Fathers said goodbye to their daughters. Families that had shared meals and stories were now strangers living in different worlds. Only one exception existed. Once every full moon, there was a mating day. On this day, the law relaxed. Married couples could reunite briefly. Single men and women who wanted children could meet. But when the sun rose the next morning, everyone returned to their own side. Life continued in this strange new way. The men learned to cook their own meals and mend their own clothes. The women built their own houses and hunted their own food. The first few months felt like relief. No more screaming in the night, no more bodies carried out at dawn. But as the seasons changed, something else began to happen in Udenta. Something neither the king nor his law had prepared for. After the separation of men and women in Udenta, life was not easy. The men had imagined a life of peace where they worked their farms and ate their fill without anyone nagging them. But reality was different. Most of them had never boiled water in their lives. They watched yams burn while their stomachs growled. Some tried to make soup, but the taste was so terrible they spat it out. The worst part was the babies. Every few weeks, another infant boy arrived from the women's village. The men took turns caring for them, but none of them knew what to do. The babies cried through the night. The men walked around with red swollen eyes and trembling hands from exhaustion. Some infants grew thin and weak. A few did not survive their first season in the men's village. The men dug small graves and told themselves it was not their fault. Their clothes fell apart. Holes appeared in their wrappers and nobody knew how to fix them. They tied knots where the fabric ripped and kept wearing the same dirty garments for weeks. The compounds looked different too. Weeds grew tall around the houses. Cooking pots sat unwashed for days until the smell drove them to rinse them poorly in the stream. Only a handful of men managed better than the rest. These were the ones who had helped their wives before the separation. They knew how to prepare a proper meal and keep a home clean. The other men watched them with envy but would not ask for help. Asking meant admitting they needed what women had always done. The lack of intimacy ate at them too. Some men could not focus on their work. They stood in their farms staring at nothing while their crops needed attention. The monthly mating day was not enough. But none of them would say this out loud. To complain meant accepting that women were important. It meant admitting the separation was a mistake. Across the path, the women's village faced its own troubles. Mothers wept for the sons taken from their arms. They wondered if the babies were eating well or sleeping through the night. Some women lay awake imagining their boys cold and crying with no one to comfort them properly. Building houses proved harder than they thought. The roofs they constructed leaked badly when rain came. Water poured into their homes and soaked their sleeping mats. They tried to hunt, but the animals were fast and the women were not used to tracking prey through the bush for hours. Meat became scarce. They ate more vegetables and grains, but their bodies craved what they could not catch. The women who had married good men felt the loss differently. They missed the warmth of another body beside them at night. They missed conversations and shared laughter. They missed feeling desired. Life was quieter now, but it also felt empty in ways they had not expected. One evening, several women gathered to talk. The dry season had been especially difficult. Their stomachs were not as full as they used to be, and their bodies ached from unfamiliar labor. "We should go to them," one woman said quietly. "We should apologize and end this madness. Our children are suffering." Other women murmured in agreement. They were tired of struggling, tired of pretending everything was fine. But Mama Ebre, the woman who spoke for all of them, stood up and silenced the group. She was older than most of them, and her voice carried weight. "No," she said firmly. "I did not want this separation at first. I thought it was cruel, but now I see it differently. This is our only chance to show them what we are worth. For too long, they have treated us like we are nothing. Like any fool can do what we do. Let them learn. Let them feel what life is like without us." She looked around at the faces watching her. "If we go back now, nothing will change. They will beat us again. They will call us lazy again. We must wait. We must make sure they break first. Our daughters are watching us. If we give up now, they will grow up the same way we did." Mama Ebere's words spread through the women's village. They would not fold. They would endure whatever they had to endure. In the men's village, similar conversations were happening. Some men wanted to cross the path and bring their families back together, but the others refused. "If we go to them now," one elder said, "they will think we are weak. They will take us for granted forever. We must stand firm." So both sides waited. Both sides suffered. Both sides pretended they were fine. The dry season stretched on. The path between the two villages seemed to grow wider each day. Everyone wondered the same thing, but nobody dared to ask it out loud. Who would break first? The men of Udenta marched to the king's palace to ask him to revoke the law. They came in the middle of the day with their eyes red from sleepless nights. They gathered before the king and told him they could not continue living this way. They had tried everything, but life without their women was incomplete. The women had brought order to their homes and color to their days. The king listened quietly to everything they said. When they finished, he told them he would not simply revoke the law. They had to go to the women's village themselves and ask their wives to return. If the women agreed to reunite, then the law would end. If the women refused, the separation would continue. Some of the men protested immediately. Going to beg the women would make them lose respect. It would make the women think they had won. The men wanted the king to just remove the law and force everyone back together. But the king refused. The men left the palace angry and confused. They argued among themselves for days. They could not continue like this. Their children were suffering. Their lives had become unbearable. So they marched to the women's village. When they reached the women's side, they stood women and admitted the truth. They could not live without them. They had been wrong to treat the women as worthless. They understood now how much the women had done to keep their families and village alive. They asked the women to come back. The women looked at each other. They had waited for this moment. It was not easy, but they had survived. But they had also missed their children. They had missed the homes they once knew, and some had missed the men who had treated them well. The separation had proven what needed to be proven. The women were not lazy or useless. They were essential. The men finally understood this truth. The women agreed to return. The news reached the king and he revoked the law that same day. Families reunited. Mothers held their sons again. Fathers embraced their daughters. The village of Udenta became whole once more. Life was not perfect after that. Couples still argued and disagreed, but the men never again called their women worthless. They all learned to respect and appreciate one another.